Hello there, everyone, and I would like to very much welcome you to this edition of the Two World Podcast. My name is Ken, and I'm greeting you from balmy Ohio here in March. As I said to Barney before we went live, it feels like the March tease. We've got a couple of days of 70s, and then the bottom sort of falls out there. Before introducing our co-host this morning, we want to send a shout out to an integral part of this team, and that is Jacob. Jacob, you are missed this morning, and we look forward to rejoining with you in the future. So having said that, please welcome, and I'd like to introduce our co-host, who is...
I am Barney, and the weather here in Japan was very, very nice today too, actually.
Oh, good to hear.
Yeah.
Good to hear. Well, folks, we're going to take a trip down our own memory lanes, as it were, today. My memory lane, as contrasted with Barney's, is more like a Route 66 all the way across the country sort of roadway. But I'm really glad to be able to be here to tell you about that.
Uh-huh.
Barney's memory lane goes back not quite as far, but nonetheless, I think and we hope you will find our little journey today to be of some interest. Everybody has a story as a 12-year-old or as a 10-year-old,
Mm.
and feel like we do too.
Yeah.
Barney, you wanna take off on this trip? And
Yeah. It was neat. It was neat talking about this, bringing up this idea with you over texts, and then talking about it a little bit more before we got started today. And yeah, when I think that I realized how important like playing unstructured play is when I was actually studying to get my master's degree in, which was in literacy and language acquisition. And so many reports referenced a researcher named F- Vygotsky, who didn't research in language acquisition at all, but researched in kind of behavioral sciences and how kids learn. And, everything he found out in his research was that kids learn through playing, through interacting with each other. And so, and then if it's unstructured with the kids making up their own rules, that's even better. And so that makes me think how great it was to have, I grew up in a rural area, but I did have one neighbor who was down the road, and I still have a memory of when maybe his family moved nearby and his mom came over and brought him and, to kind of, say, it seems like our kids are about the same age, maybe they could get together and play sometime. And I was hiding behind the overstuffed chair. But from kindergarten, then, we would ride the school bus together, and every day when we would, but just before I got off the school bus, because my stop was just before his, we would say to each other, "You want to meet halfway?" And, I would trek down, we'd, go home and like get a snack or whatever. But, less than 20 minutes after getting home from school, we would both leave our houses. I would walk halfway down the road in between our homes, meet each other, and then usually go to his house. But then when we were at his house, we almost never were inside, always outside, playing with him and his, playing together with his dog, with his younger sisters, just coming up with all kinds of silly games to play with the dog where like maybe the dog was the good guy or the bad guy or whatnot. And then one maybe real unique time that always stuck out with me is probably when we were getting to be second or third graders. So he had a creek, the whole time, but, he had a creek in between kind of the edge of his land and then a barn next door. And some like real, we noticed in the creek this small collection of little rocks that were stuck together. And, in our mind, we thought, "Whoa, this could be some kind of treasure." And we spent days and days and days digging and digging and digging and digging and digging, and finally unearthed this giant slab of concrete that, like, we needed his dad to lift out for us because it was just this huge chunk of concrete, that had weathered a bit in the creek and broken up a bit. And so those were those little bits of stones, and pebbles or whatnot that we were seeing that just drew us to it. But yeah, that kind of stuff, that kind of playing together, using your imagination, the summer, spring days, fall days, whatnot. That even now, all these years later, sticks with me. And that was so great to have that experience, growing up. I always say to my kids, to the people around me, that was the greatest thing about growing up in a rural area is you had so much space and not much to worry about in how you were playing.
So the creek, I'm trying to get even a more of a visual here. Now, were you a kid who would go in the creek?
Yeah, yeah, to an extent. So yeah, I would splash around in the creek, but I wasn't like one of the and maybe be interested in the fish and whatnot, but I wouldn't try to catch things. Definitely, I was not a worm kind of kid. Those made me run away. But but being in nature and enjoyed like the creek and whatnot, yes, that you could sign me up for
Okay.
that.
One reason I ask is we had a creek across the street from our place, and I'll get
Mhm.
into the dynamics of the neighborhood here in a moment, but I would have been a kid, Barney. Number 1, I would have been afraid of drowning, even though the creek
Oh.
was probably not more than a foot deep. It was still moving,
Uh-huh,
and
uh-huh.
and I think in part because I had a very, very careful mother, a very, you know,
Ah.
probably told me I would drown. Secondly, if I fell over while I was in the creek and had to come home in those clothes, there would have been some, some true hell to pay,
Oh, no.
and so as opposed to the one kid in our neighborhood, he was guaranteed to be in the creek, and his parents would be the ones that would say, "What'd you find?" when he got home,
Oh,
and
I
there would be
see.
no,
Oh,
he'd have to
yeah,
clean up
yeah.
his own clothes and
Oh,
everything
yeah,
like that, but a totally different attitude about that.
Oh,
So,
wow. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, my background in the town, we were viewed as having moved to the country. Jacob is with us.
Wow, what a great surprise.
What a surprise. Ladies and gentlemen,
Even if it's just a cameo.
we're not hearing your audio at the present time.
Are you in the middle of recording the episode?
We
Yeah,
are.
we just
Oh
just
my
got
goodness, I'm so
started to
sorry. I thought
reminisce.
you were gonna start at 9. I
Oh,
was just
We
well,
gonna log
started
on
a
and
little
visit with you a
early.
little bit before you started. When did you start recording?
maybe 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, uh,
But do you have, to put you on the spot, any fond, quick story of how you engaged in play when you were growing up at your house?
yes. When I was growing up, I had a lot of toys, figures that went with the TV shows that I watched, and so I had a lot of, Transformers and G.I. Joe figurines, and then I had before that He-Man and
Oh,
Thundercats,
yeah.
and we lived out in the country, and so I would enjoy going out and taking my figures outside and
Oh,
playing on a
yeah.
hillside with them, or up in a tree and having them jump down from the tree. And
Oh,
my
good.
dad had built a tree house for me when I was younger, so sometimes I
Wow.
would go there with my toys, and so yeah, it was that kind of mixture of nature and imagination, and these toys that I had seen in these shows, which were fantastic commercials for the toys. These 30-minute episodes would just get little kids like me really excited to save up their allowance and go to this Toys R Us or another store and pick up the
Great
figures.
imagination. Now,
Is that your topic today? Play?
Mhm.
yeah, being young, now as you would do this, would you ever be joined by friends,
Mm.
or was this, your imagination and your troops?
Yes, I would be joined by friends. We I I had 2 really closer friends in elementary school, Brian and Joseph,
Uh,
and then one of them, Joseph, would come over quite frequently, and I would go to his house, and so that became a huge source of joy. Some of my favorite childhood memories were going to each other's houses, and we liked to read comic books, and so
oh.
sometimes we would play out the comic stories with our
Oh,
toys, or
yeah.
we would
Oh, wow.
draw. And then we also, as we got a little older, we liked to play Nintendo Entertainment System
Mm.
video games, and so but I stay in contact with Joseph. We're lifelong friends, and I'm so grateful for that. So it's been a joy to, over the years, continue that legacy of our childhood. And but it's interesting how relationships evolve, and a lot of times
Mm.
now we're checking in about our own kids when we talk, and
Mm.
see
Mm.
what
Mhm.
they're doing. So
Mhm.
that's kind of fun as well.
Were these neighbors, or did they have to be transported? Were you able had to be transported to get gather together?
Oh, well, yes. I think I did actually bike to his house once with my dad, and it took us, I think, maybe like an hour and a half.
Oh, wow.
But by car, you could get there in about 15 to 20 minutes. So
Yeah.
he lived. I I thought I lived in the country, but Joseph definitely lived in the country even more than I did. So we would take these back winding roads,
Oh,
even
yeah.
more remote roads than the old National Pike where I was, and he lived down a long gravel driveway, and
Mm.
yeah, his mom still lives in that house, and so it's been neat to go back and visit her over the years, and yeah, such treasures. I really treasure these memories, and yeah, thank you for asking. What a
Yeah.
delight.
Mhm,
Well,
mhm.
interesting to hear both of you guys talk about the country. In my case, we moved out of Youngstown, Ohio, very much city, and that's where my mom's side of the family was, and, tiny houses close together. We were considered out in the country in nearby Canfield, Ohio, but contrasted with what I'm hearing from the 2 of you, we really did have a neighborhood. It's just that the plots were a little larger, maybe 3
Right, right.
quarters of an acre. But we would there were kids. Although, Barney, akin to your relationship with your good friend, my guy was Dave, and it was just the summer because his older brother, Ron, was in my grade, and I sometimes felt twinges of guilt that I didn't hang out with Ron in the
Oh,
summer.
no.
But, Dave was the guy. He was hilarious, exciting, a little dangerous,
Oh, yeah.
and, I always look forward to, the day with Dave and what might transpire, and he was very much into baseball, which was
Ah.
which was my life back then, amongst other things. That was a day of if we could scrape up 6 people and get a hardball game going in the empty lot, that was a full day, and, mom would be calling for lunch, and it's like, "Oh, come on," you know, I don't need that. It's the 15th inning. We just got started, and you're calling me home. So that was just great fun.
Since you said that baseball was such a big part of you growing up then, were you also on, like a rec league team, or was it all just unorganized, with your friends?
As a 10-year-old, I played then 3 years of Little League, 10, 11, and 12, and that was very cool because you had the uniforms and, an official manager, but, it took up so little of our lives. The
Mm.
season ran from, like, you got out of school, beginning of June, by mid-July, season over.
Huh.
You know, the and it was great fun, and I happened to be lucky enough to be on a good team and all of that, but still, for me, there was nothing like getting to bat, 10 times in the
Yeah.
neighborhood and,
Yeah.
you know chasing things down and yeah, all of that. So, yeah. But the organized part was good too. It wasn't volatile. I don't remember,
Oh, yeah.
people hollering and screaming, although it may have happened and I was just oblivious there. Oh, man. Good memories there.
Mm.
Yeah. So beyond the things already mentioned, what else took up your days?
Yeah, I know that, like, especially in the summertime, then, I would have some responsibilities that I would need to work on. My parents would still be going to work, but then I have 3 older siblings. So, I was always well cared for, but, my parents would leave us a list of things that they wanted us to do and hoped that we would do. And, things like clean up around the house and whatnot were the wanting to do. And then as we got older, mowing the lawn was wanting that we could do. But then helping in the garden was, especially in the strongly hoping that we could do list. The soil was always very rich and really fertile, but of course that also meant a lot of weeds, so weeds would need to be plucked and whatnot. But I always, especially when I was little, I always remember enjoying helping my dad, plant the garden. So, he would set up the a stake at one end and a stake at the other end and have a rope in the middle. And then, he would hoe along that line to make a nice straight line. And then I would go in and either he would tell me which, how frequently, which kind of spacing the seeds would need, and then I would cover them back up. And, it was also interesting that he was always real careful, because some of the seeds were treated with like maybe a fungicide or something like that. And, be careful, not to like, you know, get your fingers around your face or whatnot, because, this the different chemicals from the seeds might rub off, and you would get, might make you feel a little bit sick or whatnot. So but I don't know why that sticks with me so well, but like
But
those
it did.
memories were so great. And then of course, sometimes my dad, he really had a great idea to like give me a little section, me and all my siblings too had a little section of garden that we would have, and we could kind of choose what we wanted to plant in it. And I know that I did banana peppers one year, and they were so spicy because I think maybe our soil's a little acidic, and then that added to the spiciness. But then also,
Ah,
it didn't occur to me that the banana peppers you get at the store are kind of pickled. They're cured in like brine and whatnot, and then so that
mhm,
takes away that adds a little flavor, and it takes away the kick. And
mhm,
then so
mhm.
that was in my mind, what we would get, and then when we really cut into these things, and then they were so spicy. And then even 2 years ago, I kind of made the same misconception as well. Like, it didn't dawn on me until 2 years ago when my dad asked me if I wanted some seeds, and I said, "Oh, some banana peppers, grow those again." And I was really looking forward to them, and then they're so, so, so spicy here because our soil here is really sandy. So that was just what they wanted to pump up the heat, I think. Then I actually did have an old jar, of pickles. And when that was empty, then I just chucked a bunch of banana peppers in there and then let them cure that way. I mean, it wasn't quite the same as, the flavor wasn't the same, but it did
Right.
make them more tenable.
Wow.
But yeah, I think I'm so thankful for that, for my dad teaching me that, because that was a way to learn the lesson of hard work, but also how great it is to grow your own things. And then to go with that, in summer especially, but also in the winter a little bit, in the first few years, until maybe through junior high or before, my dad, just as a hobby, tended a few sheep, like about 10, 12, 15 head of sheep. And then doing those chores was actually fun in the winter because it was warmer in the barn and the sheep were in the barn. And then in the summer, they were always out in the pasture field. And my one brother and I had a favorite ram. His name was Ben. He was real docile actually, and he would come to like the gate. We would go down and see him, and he'd come to us, and we pet him and everything. And it was neat. But I mean, for the most part, of course, they were great around my dad because he went out every day. But we didn't go out as often. So then, when the sheep were in the barn, sometimes they'd be a little bit skittish around us. But
Mhm.
but it was nice to be able to help out there, and then sometimes even feed the lambs. Bottles because as probably you know if you've been around sheep or just read books that kind of have sheep in them, it's very very common for things to happen where the ewe maybe isn't, she's kind of lost track of how well she's caring for some of her lambs, and then we need to step in and bottle feed them, but they grow up and get ready. And so that was another experience that I'm real thankful for, and also taught me about how it's good to have balance, to work hard, but also to have things that you can enjoy throughout the day too. It doesn't have to all be hard work, but I can't really share those kinds of experiences with my kids so much anymore. A little bit of the gardening, but tending animals like that is we'd have to move to Hokkaido maybe, up way up north in the very rural area. But
Sure.
yeah, for yourself, I know that you're a nature guy now, but did your folks keep garden or did you have pets that you also helped care for when you were growing up?
Yeah, good questions, Barney. We had a garden. Now, my dad, we didn't have the size of property. I know where you grew up basically and didn't quite have that size. So, relatively small garden, and it's probably the neatest garden I've ever seen. He he was meticulous about keeping the weeds out. This was the obsession. So when I would cut the grass, we would then take a manual push grass catcher
Mm,
and, push it along and
mhm,
sweep up all the grass into it, and then that would go into the garden.
mhm.
Now, as I grew in some knowledge of soil aeration and so on, I really came to realize that, you're kind of drowning out drowning out the dirt. But anyhow, it
Mm.
kept all the
Oh,
weeds
yeah.
at a bare minimum, and he would have peppers and tomatoes and maybe a few cukes, and that was it. I was all in favor of plowing up the whole yard because I
Oh,
loved
yeah.
corn.
Oh,
I
yeah.
still do. And, let's it's gonna save money, Dad. That
Yeah,
was one
really.
thing you could appeal to him on.
Yeah.
It's gonna save money in the long run. You just plant it, it grows up, and you eat for days and
I know it. How much is a pack of seed compared to what that would cost you at the supermarket?
I'm impressed that you did peppers from seed.
Mm. Oh, yeah.
I Angie has done it here, my wife, and, it's you really gotta pay so much attention. I have
Mhm.
not ever done that. I've always bought the little plants and put them in as an adult,
Ah.
but
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
and I love peppers as well.
Mhm.
Boy, you've conjured up a number of things with your stories there. For chores, never remember a list being left.
Okay.
I just kind of knew by verbal instruction, I needed to take care of the grass.
Mm,
You would,
mm,
cut
mhm,
we had a riding mower, it
mhm.
wasn't a 5-hour deal, um, and then trim with a hand mower.
Oh, yeah.
I do recall this, Barney, my mother was deeply into flowers up around the house, next to the house, with a couple of small islands out in the yard. If I ever accidentally cut one of those flowers, I'd be thinking about maybe heading out, maybe packing up some stuff and because it felt so terrible. And she was gonna yell. She wasn't gonna say, "Oh,
Uh-uh.
well." it'll grow back.
It'll grow back. Yeah.
I ruined her artistry,
Oh man. Oh yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah. I
I
bet.
was quite careful there, but,
Mhm.
I enjoyed it's funny, and I think it's happening to you as we tell these stories, more stuff pops into your
Oh
head.
yeah.
I can remember riding around on the mower, and because the mower was loud, I would sing while I was on the mower to the
Mm.
popular songs of the
Mhm.
day.
Mhm.
Now, I would be a '60s guy, a 1960s guy, so, I'm singing Beatles and Turtles and Stones and,
Oh, nice.
while you're on the mower and the yards were far
Mm.
enough apart that, I wasn't gonna be embarrassed by someone hearing
No
me.
one would. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I was thinking too, as you talked about your friend and the surrounding areas,
Mhm.
our neighborhood was such that, and I know this is not common anymore, we would just cut through people's yards, to when I'm going to Dave's house, I would just cut through people's
Mhm.
yards, and then you
Mhm.
didn't have to walk in the street
Mhm.
necessarily. It wasn't that
Mhm.
busy a street, but
Mhm.
and there was just nothing said. You
Mm,
just
mm,
this is
mm,
this is what you did in the neighborhood
mm,
at times. So, it's odd to think about that in terms of now. As
mm,
far as pets, we never had any. My
mm,
sister was deeply allergic to the world and had severe asthma, and, it just wasn't gonna happen.
mm,
I did have a turtle.
mm.
This was my one pet, my turtle Garfunkel, um, another '60s reference,
Nice, yeah.
and I enjoyed the turtle.
Oh,
He
yeah.
didn't he didn't, do tricks and play dead. He only
Right,
played dead
he
once, if
can't
you
oh,
catch my drift.
yeah, really, yeah.
But, how about you? How about you with pets?
Yeah. Yeah, I know that, of course, we had cats for the barn.
Ah,
Yeah, and then we from the rescue, from the shelter, we got some dogs. And we only would ever have 1 at a time, for the most part, and the one kind of interesting thing is how the dogs, like, progressively got to have more in the house time, throughout the years. So, like, at first they were, only outside or, maybe maybe only inside, at nighttime or maybe in the garage, and then
okay.
eventually, like, then the it got to where, like, the dog would tell us when they wanted to go outside. Then they were inside the rest of the time. But that was another thing, like, like I said, playing with my friend's dog all the time, and then having a dog at the house too, to, like, just run around with or try to run faster than, when you're growing up, or, throwing, sticks and whatnot, and just yeah, like, the dogs, we were always real lucky that the dogs always want to go around with us, when we were kids going outside,
Oh,
and,
cool.
because we also had a woods behind the house too. And I didn't always spend so much time in the woods, but occasionally I thought, well, I'll just see, explore in the woods a bit. The dog would come to and sniff and, root around it with everything. But we always had one funny memory of one of our dogs that, you know, I believe that dogs don't really see a wide range of colors, especially maybe they don't see red or green. But this one dog, probably she just knew the smell of a ripe tomato so well, and if you weren't careful, she would just go into the garden and pluck tomatoes from the vine and just chop them up.
Wow, I've not heard of a dog doing that.
Yeah. So, and then, of course, my dad would grow, like, like, the beefsteaks and the Superman
Mhm.
tomatoes, so the real big ones. So she would always get a real feast.
Did she digest it, or did she
Yeah,
just like
she would
chewing them up?
pluck it, and, like, find a little space to lay down in the lawn and just,
Oh
have her
my.
tomato.
Well, there's a dog with a great taste.
Yeah, really,
I'm
yeah, boy.
in admiration.
Yeah.
Maybe not of the act, but
No, yeah, but real appreciative of my dad's gardening skills.
Well, I've got a couple of dog stories that you've
Mhm.
sparked.
Okay.
Again, we didn't have our own,
Yeah.
but
Oh, yeah.
there's across the street, we had Smokey the dog. When you don't have pets, I think sometimes you tend to be afraid. I was afraid of
Mm.
dogs
Mm, mhm,
to some
mhm,
extent.
mhm, mm.
Smokey was like the friendly guy, and to me, patting him on the head was good enough. I'm not gonna get my
Mm,
hand down
mhm,
near that mouth
mhm,
because he'll
mm, mm.
probably chew my hand off,
For
and he
sure,
was
yeah,
so
right, yeah.
docile, but next door to us, the 2 neighbors raised Doberman Pinschers,
Ah,
and they explained to us, they said, "It's possible." I wasn't gonna get near any of
right,
those dogs,
right.
but they said, "These 2 are very friendly, but Nola has just always had a bad temperament." Okay,
Uh-huh,
so each day, Barney, to catch the bus, you had to walk to the top of our street. There was
uh-huh,
no picking you up at the driveway,
uh-huh,
maybe
uh-huh.
500 yards. One
Right.
morning, as I'm walking by their house right next to ours, Nola bursts out the front door. I thought I was gonna die. I froze
Yeah.
because, you'd always been told, "Don't run, stand still."
Oh,
Well, I
yeah.
was frozen out of pure, absolute terror, and, I'm across the street, and Nola comes to the front ditch and is just screaming and
Oh, no.
hollering,
Oh,
and I'm not
boy.
seeing any people chasing this dog, you know? And I just thought, "This is it. This is it." But sure enough, the lady came out and just, lambasted the dog verbally, "Get back in here." She knew that it had just scared the life right out
Ooh.
of me, and,
Man,
off I
oh,
went
man.
to school then.
Yeah, somehow. Yeah, because a Doberman. Wow, I mean, any
Oh,
dog that's barking like that, but Dobermans, boy, they look as sleek as they are and muscular. You can see those
tough.
muscles. They
Yeah, they
just
look.
look scary.
Yep.
Yeah. Ooh.
So it took a long time after that to get near a dog,
Yeah.
because all
Yeah.
my worst fears
Ooh.
had been realized in that terrorizing moment, so,
Mm.
yeah. Yeah, that was just one of those stories, the near miss. So and yeah, ouch,
Wow,
ouch.
wow, wow.
Um, you mentioned also you had a woods behind you. Again, relatively speaking, because a woods to you, I can picture.
Sure.
I had a woods next to me,
Okay.
which actually divided the Doberman house from ours.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
Very narrow lot, um, which eventually was bought by, a later couple that moved
Mm,
into
mhm,
the
mhm,
Doberman house. Very narrow lot, but it had beautiful tall trees. It
mm,
was untamed, there were weeds,
mm.
and for me, I would just wander in there and feel like I'm in the woods, because
Yeah.
we were not people who went to a forest or went out to,
Mhm,
parks like that.
mm,
And a memory I have from there is there was one maple tree that was just a great tree to climb. The branches were
mhm.
just perfect, and it was tall. But when you're a kid, you don't think about
Oh,
falling
yeah.
out of the thing and all that. And I would take old little motors that were thrown away, and the little motors had copper wire, very thin
Mm,
copper
mhm,
wire, and
mhm.
I'd unravel it and put it onto like a spool for myself, and I would take that up in the tree, and I would attach it at the tallest branch I could reach, bring the wire down across and into my bedroom window,
Wow.
and then I would put a little clip on it, a little alligator clip,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
used to be used on the back of your TV for antennas and so on,
Uh,
and then open up my little transistor radio and clip that to the antenna bar, and at night, I could pick up
wow.
stations in
Oh,
Texas.
yeah.
This was thrilling, and I
Oh,
can't believe to
wow.
this day my father would allow this. I mean, I was building a lightning rod.
I know. I thought maybe that was where you were going with at the
No,
start of this story.
it never happened, and, it wasn't like they didn't know I had done this. I
Yeah,
mean, you
yeah,
could s
yeah.
copper's easily spotted 'cause of the red coloring,
Sure.
and it right into my bedroom window, and they let it
Wow.
slide. It's hard to believe.
That's but ingenious. That's just so amazing, and you could get stations from that far away.
Well, I
Man.
appreciate ingenious, but there were some experiments that went awry.
Oh, no.
I had these little walkie-talkies,
Mm.
They took 9-volt batteries,
Oh, yeah.
and I would use it in my room sometimes that you couldn't pick up much, but
Mhm,
occasionally you'd
mhm,
find somebody on there. And
mm,
I thought to myself, wasting all the money on these batteries. I've got this electric cord that was from an old lamp. Why not attach the leads to where the battery contacts are and just
mhm.
plug this baby into the
Mm.
wall? Well, I ruined that walkie-talkie.
Oh,
It
no.
starts smoking and melting, and I thought, "I think I've made a terrible mistake," and it was burning my head, and I'm thinking, "How am I gonna stop this?
Right, yeah, really?
How am I
Where do
gonna"
you disconnect the from the wall or from the walkie-talkie that's in your hand? Which one is closer, but not the other is safer?
Oh, successes and failures.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, really, yeah.
Oh, man. One other thing to get your take on this, Jacob briefly mentioned a father in neighborhood building a tree house.
Mm.
We did in that little lot, we did build our own.
Oh,
We
wow.
would scrape together nails that our dads would allow and some boards and
Mm,
things. We
mm,
basically just made a platform, and
mhm.
then, like, my mother would have a couple of old blankets that she didn't care that we nailed them to the tree, which pains me
Mm.
today to know that we were nailing these things to trees.
I know.
As well as the braces for the floor, but we thought it was the coolest thing, and
Oh,
we nail
yeah.
little horizontal pieces up the tree to
Oh,
use
for
for
climbing.
steps. Mhm, for the
Mm.
climb to get in there, and it was a great couple of days to build the treehouse, 'cause then,
Oh, yeah.
you knock it down, and then you'd build another one, then you'd knock it.
Oh, wow.
An
Yeah, because
activity.
like, I'm I would really be curious one day to hear Jacob's about his, because I know that his dad was pretty crafty,
Mhm.
so I wonder if it was pretty neat, but for me, it was always just like what you would see on TV, and they always look so cool, and I bet probably in your case, the fun of building it is your imagination while you're building it, thinking, "We're gonna make this amazing treehouse," and
Mhm.
it's gonna be so cool, and you're actually able to do it. That must have been so neat, but yeah, like, we always had, I mean, the trees around our house, we had, a flowering or a tulip tree, which was very tall, and then a buckeye tree, which was thin but also quite tall, and then lots of black walnut trees, which were incredibly tall. And so
Can I ask you, what's a tulip tree? I mean, is it flower like a tulip? I
it
don't know
it
this.
does it kind of maybe I wonder if it's in the magnolia family because it would put out white flowers, but the petals were very hardy. So they weren't delicate at all, but you would get a few flowers out of it, but, the wood was not as dense, I guess.
Okay,
So it
okay.
it would lose some limbs, like, with strong wind and whatnot, and it was actually right next to my parents' house, so thankfully it never came down, but or my parents' room, their bedroom, so thankfully it never came down, but yeah, aside from that, all of our trees were so tall and the limbs were also equally tall that we couldn't dream of. Yeah, it didn't even have trees to really climb in our case,
Okay.
but plenty of trees to be around.
I'm also reminded of when we were building, these kinds of things. This was not our property, which again strikes me as, and I never remember people ever coming that owned it. They
Huh.
must have driven by at some point.
Mhm,
You know,
mhm,
uh, it wasn't, the day and age of, remote ownerships
mm,
and just doing it for profit and fun. And I mean, they're paying property taxes and never saw anyone, and
wow.
I'm in there all the time playing around, and, today it might be like, "Get out of there because you're gonna
Mm,
fall out of a tree, you're
mhm,
going to,
mhm, mhm,
sue us for 1.5 million," and
mhm, mhm.
but it didn't happen, which another quick story, these are flooding in now, this is like the gates are open.
Oh, yeah.
One day I come home from school, and I see my mother in the back, and I see all this smoke. and she actually lit the I she was burning the papers or something, and I don't know what happened, but it was dry, and she started the woods on fire,
Oh,
and,
no.
she's out there with a shovel beating it, and she didn't wanna call the fire department, and she's
Yeah.
just sweating and
Oh,
breathing. She's a
no.
heavy smoker, and it
Oh,
just
no.
and she's so angry, and it got put out. It wasn't like the whole woods, but
Yeah, 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 yeah. Did
oh
you
goodness.
like, was it just so when you got there, it was just her, and then you went to help too. Did other people to come to help as well, or just the 2 of
Nope.
you managed to
We
get
just
it out?
hurried up and beat it down before it really got to the grasses that
Oh,
would,
man.
have
Oh,
ruined
yeah, that could have been out of hand. Oh, boy. Oh.
we called it the woods,
Mm,
that's what everybody knew it
mhm,
as in our
mhm.
little neighborhood, 'cause the rest there weren't any other empty lots on the street, so
Oh,
all the
okay.
kids knew what you were
Mhm,
talking about when you
mhm,
yeah,
mhm.
when you said the woods. Let me ask you this, living where you did you sleep outside at all?
Oh, yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Since there were 6 of us in the family, then a lot of our vacation was usually camping, and so we had a big six-person tent, and then a lot later than we finally got, like an additional tent to go with it, and then just downsize from that one, but sometimes, yeah, like, my brothers and sister and I would ask our dad to put the tent up in the yard, and he would, and it was so neat. You know, it's funny how, like, when you're camping, when you're on vacation camping, that's wonderful, but for some reason, when you're camping in your backyard, there's something really wonderful about that. Maybe because you know that if you want to, you can still go inside, but and then there's plumbing, that you can have access to, but there's something I think, like, having the sounds of the outside, that you could have with you, throughout the whole night, and it was cool at nighttime. We my my parents' bedroom, they had my mom made sure that they had air conditioning, window air conditioner, but we didn't because our house was built in 1840, so it didn't have that. But so that I remember, my brother and I shared a room for a long time, and it did have two windows, on what it would be on the west side and on the north side of the house, and then we had a box fan, you know
Mhm.
either pointed in or pointed out, and, my brother and I would say to our mom, "It's just so hot. It's just so hot. It's just so hot," and she would say, "If you lay still, and just relax, you'll feel the breeze, through the open windows." And the box fan was, like, kind of around the corner even, but it worked. We laid still and we would feel the breeze and then eventually get to sleep. And, you know, hot in Ohio is a very relative term. I
Sure.
would I would take that quote unquote heat in a second living here in Japan, you
Okay.
know, where it is 85 at night and 100% humidity and 0 breeze. And I sometimes I still try to use that line with my kids, because as adults, less we're a little bit more impervious to the fluctuations of the temperature than the kids are.
Yes.
So I might be okay with the windows open. My kids are not, and I try to tell them, "Just lay still, and you'll feel the breeze," and then they will have nothing nothing of that. But,
Well,
um
you sort of become your mother, and
yeah,
that's a
I know.
natural progression, and
Yes, yes. It worked for us, it might
yeah,
work
there
for
you
them, but
go.
it never was. But about camping and sleeping outside, even 2 years ago in the summer, my youngest son and I, we got this very small, two-person tent up, and we set that up and slept outside, and that was fun. It's just always really a nice, neat experience that was for us.
Well, we also had no air conditioning. Our house was built in 1960, and they weren't going to buy in the window. And in the bedroom, I had 2 windows. I had my own room. There were only
Mhm,
2 kids,
mhm.
but the windows were up very high,
Oh.
which I think was a security measure by the contracting
Mm,
building company
mm,
at that time.
mhm.
But you know what, Barney? I don't ever remember being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I did I sweated a lot anyhow, and I guess I didn't care.
Yeah.
I didn't care, so I don't remember lamenting that at all, and
Oh,
I
nice.
could be a whiny kid, and I'm surprised
Sure.
I didn't. Uh, as far as camping, that was not going to happen.
Oh,
You
no.
know, my mother sleeping on the ground in a tent, impossible. So, we did go in the backyard. I remember the very first time, and this time it was with I had mentioned my 2 friends, Dave
Mm,
and his older brother, Ron. It was
mhm,
Ron and I.
mm.
It was a small two-person tent, no floor. You
Oh,
know, it was a very original, heavy tarped pup tent that, you just staked out and that was it.
yeah.
It was
Oh,
gonna
wow.
keep the rain off of you
Yeah,
unless it
and then that's it.
rolled in.
Yeah.
But I remember the first night we did it, it was so cool to be out there because it felt like, you're away from your parents,
Mm,
and this is really an independence type thing.
mm.
And Ron brought this radio he had just gotten that had shortwave capabilities. And again, sort of like my experience with AM radio and picking up
Yeah,
stations around
yeah.
the country, here we are picking up the BBC broadcasts in England, and I just
Whoa.
thought that was the coolest thing.
Wow.
We didn't seem to be ever and we slept out in the backyard a lot and
Mhm.
with his younger brother as well. Don't remember food being a thing.
Hmm,
It was
hmm,
just being out there,
mm.
sort of scared at times because it was a pretty dark neighborhood, but hearing those sounds and waking up in the morning when, it was getting light and,
Mm,
maybe it was a hot morning and the tarp was already radiating a bit of heat and, yeah, that seemed to be enough.
mm.
It just didn't seem like food was a thing or yeah.
Yeah, and the one neat thing I also thought of when camping is just, like, you just naturally wake up when the sun comes up, it just naturally seems to happen, but you don't feel sleepy, you know?
Mhm.
You could set your alarm in your bed for the exact same time, and you would wake up and think, "Oh, it's time to wake up already," but then you sleep in the tent and with no alarm, and you wake up when the sun comes, and you feel fantastic, so there really is something great about that.
Yep.
Yeah.
I will admit further, uh, mainly because my parents aren't on Earth anymore. As Dave and I began our experience camping out in the backyard, and at his place, we'd sleep on the porch, the back
Mhm. Oh,
porch.
wow. That's
Our
cool.
our parents were never checked on us, they were
Uh-huh.
pretty heavy sleepers. We started to wander away from the tent.
Oh, no.
It seemed so daring to wander up the street
Oh,
at
yeah.
2 o'clock in the morning,
Oh,
and,
yeah.
one night, Barney, I have to admit, Dave and I were wandering up the street,
Uh-huh.
okay? And suddenly I hear from a distance from my house, "Kitty!" All right, what what are we gonna tell my dad on this one?
Oh, man.
This is deep trouble. This
Oh,
is
no.
so we didn't return home immediately. We ran to Dave's house.
Mm.
This makes no sense whatsoever. We ran to Dave's house and got some food,
Okay.
and we carried it back to my house, and, "Dad, what were you doing?" "Well, we went to Dave's house to get some food.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
We have food right here in our house.
I know.
We're going with that."
Well, yeah.
I think that tempered our wandering away for quite some time.
Yeah, really.
He he
Oh,
must have
man.
checked.
Of all things.
Of all
Whew.
yeah, yeah, just
Wow.
yeah.
And then, I mean, to be a parent, and not know where your kid is then
That
is
too.
a big panic, but, oh, man, but to be on the other end when you're a kid and you know that you've got to come up with something real fast or you're gonna be in big trouble.
Exactly our thought. And you wonder, yeah, you're talking about from his end, did he I wonder if in his day and age, he thought we were taken or,
Mm,
something terrible had happened because we certainly weren't answering his calls.
yeah.
We're plotting the next yeah. The next move.
Yeah, really, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, anyhow, thanks for, opportunity to share that little discretion
Oh, yeah.
discretionary move.
Mhm.
Um, bicycles.
Mm.
I'm assuming you probably were out there riding? You
Yeah,
talked, an hour and a
yeah.
half trip or Jacob was it Jacob the hour and a half
That was
trip
Jacob,
to the
yeah.
friends? Yeah.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, but so this is kind of the other end of the spectrum of growing up in a rural area is, if you're on a country road, then it's a little unpredictable. You have to be real careful about cars. We did have something real nice on our road that I think they put maybe it's called a culvert, like a big pipe that connected. So we had a creek by our house too, and then to let it run under the road, there's a big pipe that let the
Yep,
creek run through.
yep.
And for whatever reason, um, it was this way for as long as I know. You know, just whichever road crew it was that put this culvert in or this big pipe, they didn't make it so level. So this turned into kind of a natural speed bump where if cars that didn't know the road, if they would drive down the road too fast, they would scrape the bottom of their car. And then that was the last time that they would ever do that. So, so then most people knew who would travel on a road, had any reason to travel on a road back then because of course there was no GPS telling people that this is the fastest way, to cut down this road, So the only people who would take our road, basically were the ones that needed to be there. So they all knew, once we get near the Martin house, we've got to slow down or we're going to scrape the bottom of our car.
Wow.
So
Wow.
in our case, that kept us pretty safe from, because on the other end of the road, there was a hill that cars would come down, kind of a big hill. So it if you're outside and playing and not listen carefully, the car could come up upon you pretty quick. So
Okay.
we did ride bikes, through the yard a bunch and whatnot, but riding them on the road wasn't something that we really did so much. But when I was older, when I was in high school before I was driving, then I would ride my bike around to my friends' houses and whatnot. But yeah, but before then, if we did ride bikes, it was usually through the yard and with a bunch of hills and a pretty big yard, that was always pretty fun,
Mhm.
to have, like, the little BMX bikes or the little kind of mountain bike, pre-era mountain bikes that we could go through
Yes,
and
yes.
yeah, and and then in a way so since that hill that I mentioned, was also on our property too, and so that was a lot of fun to in the summer to ride your bikes down that hill because it was real steep, and then, of course, in the winter, we could use that hill for sledding, which was just fantastic. And just to kind of you just kind of add this little story about that. A few years we would have the the right conditions where we'd get the snow, and then it'd get real cold and real dry, and then the snow would be like real icy. And normally it was just like kind of powdery snow. We could take the sleds and which
Mhm.
had the steel runners or the toboggan even, but if we could get it just right, we could use trash bags and like kind of get like almost in our imagination, it was like a little luge course because it would stay real frozen and it was deep enough that we could just slide down on these trash bags and wind our way, through the course and, bend this way and bend that way through the curves and whatnot. And then there was a tiny creek on that side of the property too, and so it made like a natural dip at the bottom of the hill too, and then you could like just jump a little bit, either on the sled or on the little trash bag course, so you could get a nice little bump at the bottom of the hill too. And then my friends would often come because that was the biggest hill in the area, so my friends would come for sledding in that spot too, and that was really, really nice.
Wow, that's sweet.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Again, across the street from our house where the creek was, there's a hill down to it.
Mm.
Not the greatest, this is a 5-second hill. This is not,
Okay.
we would occasionally go to other places, but, when my mother never drove, so, you were making your own fun that
Mhm.
way. But the greatest snow would be where not only would it take you down the hill, it's cold enough that the creek is frozen.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure I thought about falling through, of course, because I was such a fatalistic
I know.
little
It is a
schmuck,
deep, deep creek here.
but you could glide right across,
Oh,
right
nice.
across the ice and then run into the bank on the other side, and that was
Mm.
just such a cool thing. So that yeah, yeah. As far as bicycling, we were blessed with a road that wasn't that busy.
Yeah.
It was definitely a side road, and, you evolve from going up and down the road, I'm gonna go to Dave's house, Dave's gonna come down here, to going almost around the block because 3 of the 4 roads that comprise the block were not very busy.
Mhm.
The main road, which is a large route, Route 62, which goes all the way through Canton and
Mm.
and further west, was at the top of our street where we caught the bus.
Oh, yeah.
So a big accomplishment, and again, it's another one of those things where the parents letting us do this was such a when you look back, because it was a 45 miles an hour state
Oh,
route,
wow.
but
Mm.
we were allowed to go up there, and then it was about a half a mile to what we called Cornersburg. It was like a
Mhm.
burg where, there's a grocery store, there's a
Mhm.
drugstore, there's, getting
Mhm.
candy bars and all of that.
Mhm.
Being allowed to get to there, you know, for a you'd spend hours up there because it was just such a major thing to
Oh,
do.
yeah.
But that road was narrow, and luckily, we never met any horrible fates.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of one of our great activities up there. This lasted about 2 years. Coke sponsored this, like, football contest,
Huh.
and a lot of things were in bottles at that point.
Mhm.
There were
Mhm.
hardly any cans of
Mhm.
soda. We would take, you would open your bottle, the lids would go down into a little trough
Mhm.
to collect, in the machine in
Oh,
the,
yeah.
grocery store and in the drugstore and so on. So we would take with us our little string magnets, and we would go into the store, and if, especially if the proprietors were in a good mood, they wouldn't holler at us. We would
Uh-huh.
spend time fishing those things out,
Oh, yeah.
and then you pasted them to this sheet which had all the names of the
Oh.
players, the football players, and so on, and when you filled it, then you could go take it to the Coke bottling company in Youngstown, and you got whatever prize,
Oh,
was
wow.
available. Yeah. So,
Wow.
yeah, and I still have my little magnet on a string
Oh,
that I
nice.
used to use because it was just perfect. It was a strong magnet, but
Oh, yeah.
every once in a while, you would get, "Kids, get out of here. Get out of here. You're not buying anything, move along." But that was great excitement, and,
That's cool.
being
Wow.
allowed to ride your bike up there was big.
Mm.
Baseball glove was always on the bike, even
Mm.
when you were
Mhm.
going to stores and things, that's because baseball.
Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like a crazy thing now a bit to be
Yeah.
10 years old and riding on a busy road like that, but I think people were pretty good and pretty
Mm.
cognizant of
Mhm.
we're not
Mm.
the only ones
Mhm.
out there, and yeah,
Mhm. Mhm.
so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, less distractions in general for drivers back then too, and
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
less yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Did you have a multi-gear bike? We were 1 gear with a brake pedal.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. My first bike also was yeah, like, it's just one you pedal forward, and then if you wanna stop, you pedal backward, right?
Yep.
That was to
Right pedal,
activate the
yep.
brake, yeah, mhm.
Mhm. And so that allowed the great thing about those brakes, it
Uh-huh.
allowed for skidding.
Yeah, Yeah, that's right.
and just screaming
Fishtailing
along,
and
ruining your back tire.
oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah. My older brother and I, we speaking of ruining back tires, maybe, we found out one time that, like, if you would crunch an aluminum can on the back of your tire, you could kind of get it to stay on there, and it would, like, rest it would rub against it would catch, like, at the frame that would connect with the seat, and as long as you're pedaling forward, it would stay connected, and it would make the sound like a motorcycle, like a BMX bike. It would go
How cool is that?
so we would we had our dirt bikes and we would put our bicycles and put those aluminum cans on the back and just ride all the way out. Go, you know, making
Cool.
that sound. It's so cool.
Well, we were real old school with a clothespin and a baseball card in the
Oh
spokes,
yeah.
but this sounds I've never heard of this
No,
before, Barney. This is
we just figured it out by
revolutionary.
accident. You know, one of those. Yeah.
Of course,
One
of
of those
course.
when you could get
Oh,
one that would just stay there and it would actually, like, chew through the can a bit, and then you'd try to get another one that would fit just right, and
nice, nice.
yeah.
Well, I know we have some visual aids. I know you
Mm,
have some
mhm,
pictures. I have some
mhm.
things here, so maybe we can kinda segue into
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
portion.
yeah, yeah. Mhm.
For me, it's going back to baseball.
Mm,
Barney, baseball was everything to me.
mm.
When I thought about what I wanted to be growing up, there was no doubt, you know, I
Yeah.
would love to be a major league baseball player, and I'll do it for free.
Yeah,
It's
oh, yeah, really. Oh, yeah.
just to I remember walking into I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, maybe even 6,
Mhm.
church trip to Cleveland Stadium. We were Indians fans.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
First time walking into that stadium, and this was a night game, which was even more impressive.
Oh,
To
nice.
see the lights on that field, it was just astounding.
Oh,
I
yeah.
was a huge, huge Indians fan. I mean,
Mhm.
I just you couldn't see a lot of games, so I listened
Mm.
very
Mhm.
faithfully
Mhm.
whenever I could,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I used to in the mid '60s, I wrote to a lot of players,
Cool.
and
Wow.
at that time, when you would write to a player, they most almost without fail, I don't remember too many times when I wrote and didn't get a response.
Wow.
You would get a postcard-sized picture of the player, black and white, and I have a
Mm.
few here I'll show,
Mm.
and you always hope that on the other side that it was them writing your name,
Yeah.
and I have a feeling in most cases it was because
Mhm.
they didn't have entourages, and they didn't
Mm.
necessarily have people to do these things.
Right.
I'm gonna lead in real quick with a story of the very first one I ever received, because I
Yeah.
know you're gonna know who this person is
Uh-huh.
or perhaps his son, okay?
Ha 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 ha.
Barney, when I was about 9, we were playing backyard, hardball,
Mm.
and one of the kids was a little bit older than us, so he was stronger, and we were pitching from short distances away,
Okay,
and
okay.
as it turned out, too short, and Melvin wa is his name. He had gotten this brand new bat, and one of our heroes on the Indians was a guy named Rocky Colavito,
Yeah.
power hitter,
Yeah.
and Rocky would always point the bat at the pitcher. This was his
Oh, man.
ritual,
Ooh.
and, I'm pitching,
Yeah.
and
Oh.
Melvin is pointing that bat at me. So I toss one to him, and he just rockets one right back at me,
Oh.
hits me right here,
Oh.
broke my cheekbone.
Oh.
I mean, it was a big mess, I'm
Oh.
wandering home crying, and my mother's
Ooh.
running up the street wondering, what happened,
Oh.
and I was in the hospital for a couple of days.
Mm.
They were naturally trying to take X-rays to see if the skull was
Mm.
fractured and so
Mm.
on, and I'd never been in a hospital before and scared and lonely
Oh, man.
and all of those things, and my dad comes in the 2nd day,
Mm.
and he says, "Something came in the mail for you."
Oh.
And so I open this up, and there's this picture in there. It's the first one I ever received. This is a guy named Tito Francona. His son, Terry Francona,
Yeah.
who was known by almost everyone as Tito because of his dad, became,
Mm.
you know, he's he's still managing. He's
Yeah.
managing the Reds now.
Reds. Yeah.
He managed the Red Sox and brought them back to a World
Yeah.
Series victory, first time in 86 ye and Tito was a very good player,
Mm.
and, this raised my spirits like nothing
Oh,
else
wow.
to get that first one, and, you know,
Wow.
I often thought, and I didn't do it, of writing a letter to Terry when he was up in Cleveland just to say, "I want to tell you something
Mhm.
your dad did to really
Mhm.
make me feel like $1,000,000," and,
Oh, no kidding.
I went on to receive a whole bunch of other ones. I'm not gonna show them all.
Mhm.
There's the Rocky Colavito that I mentioned. Things like this.
Oh, oh,
I don't know if you can
wow.
read it and it's
Yeah.
backwards. He put my
Best
name on
wishes,
the front.
Kenny.
You kn
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
putting Dave Nelson, I think he became a coach for teams, not a manager, many, many years, and I just suddenly Davey is, he's Dick Hauser, he managed a lot of major league
Yeah,
teams.
yeah.
Yeah,
Whoa.
and this
Wow.
guy, he wasn't well known. His name's Tony Horton.
Mhm.
I became part of his fan club,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
thought that was the coolest thing because the lady who was in charge of it would send personal letters to us,
Oh,
and then you got a little bit bigger picture
whoa.
of Tony. They actually had a party. I didn't go. They had a party with free tickets to a game out
Wow.
beyond the fence in Cleveland Stadium.
Whoa.
Really neat thing. And then there was this
So
one
cool.
player. He probably became more known as an announcer, I think, for the White Sox for many, many years. There's always gonna be flamboyant athletes,
Yeah.
and this guy, Ken Harrelson, was one of those guys. He
Oh,
was
really?
known as the Hawk. Pretty good player, decent player, but not
Uh-huh,
fabulous.
uh-huh, uh-huh.
But, you have the pictures like this, okay? Now,
Yeah.
here's the one that
Oh,
comes
boy.
from Hawk. I
Oh,
still have the
boy.
envelope here,
It's huge.
okay? Now you open it up. Now most of the guys, you got the uniform top is
Yeah.
and you can tell. Now here's Hawk, and he signs it Hawk.
Hawk. Wow, he's got the ascot. He does have a baseball bat, but no uniform. He's just in
He's
his
g
regular.
he's
Whew.
just got it all
I
going,
mean, is that like, he's
and,
got the nice
it wasn't
belt and, like
unexpected that Hawk would do this sort of thing.
that is
It was
amazing. That's so cool.
and I'll share one more thing and then, move on to
Sure,
some more
sure.
history. Going to Cleveland Stadium for me was our vacation because we didn't take summer
Mm.
vacations. My
Mhm.
sister, just couldn't go places. It wasn't gonna
Yeah.
so that was such a big deal. And
Mm.
here's another thing that in this day and age, it's just hard to believe this sort of thing happened.
Mm.
At Cleveland Stadium for several years, they would have Bat Day.
Oh, yeah.
Now they didn't give you like this little stick
Mm-mm.
this big. They gave you this.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
this is one of the
Wow.
bats I got from Bat
Wow.
Day up there. And
Phew.
Barney, I can remember, like, in the 7th inning, there would be the stretch, and then everybody would wave their
Oh,
bats around
man.
in the air, and
Oh, man.
it almost seemed barbaric back then.
I know.
I just couldn't believe they gave you something like this,
Yeah.
just
But I went once when I was little on bat day too, and mine was like kid size. Like yours looks like a full size bat. Mine
yeah,
was like a bat meant for a kid, but and it's black, and it had Indians on it in red, print that was on it, and I used that all the time. I would go out in the summer in my big yard. I would toss the ball up to myself, grab the bat, whack it as hard as I could. I put so many dents in that bat because I just loved that thing so much. It was so great. And yeah, like you say, you never, ever, ever get that now.
yep,
But
yep.
to have that as a promotion, whew, yeah,
Amazing. Yeah, and I would do the same as you before I got
yeah.
strong enough where the hardball wasn't gonna stay in the yard. I would also stand the end of our driveway, it was cemented, but the end about 10 feet just had stones,
Mm, mm.
and I would take wiffle ball bats and
Yeah.
just whack them into the woods across the street where the creek
Uh-huh.
was.
Uh-huh.
It was
Uh-huh.
just
Uh-huh.
endless, and, dad would say, "Boy, doesn't seem like we have as many stones as we used to have here in the end of the."
They don't grow back, do they?
But I don't think that really angered him
Not
all that
such a big
much,
deal.
so.
Yeah, right.
Oh, how about
Yeah.
some lingering memories for you here?
Yeah. So this is more recent. Just I have when we were talking about what a show might be, we were thinking kind of more sports oriented a little bit,
Mhm.
and so I prepared some photos. And yeah, for me, like going to an Indians game in summer was so great. I know that once once we went, I think it was maybe boys club at church. We went to a game instead of going to church on Sunday. And
Wow.
yeah, and I know that we, because the Sunday game started at 105, and I was real excited for it. And I knew that the Texas Rangers, were going to be in town. And at that time, you couldn't look up and see who the pitcher was going to be. But I thought, oh, if it's a Sunday game and if it's the last game of the series, it might be Nolan Ryan.
Nolan Ryan,
And it
yes.
was. And I mean, it was just us also at the Cleveland Stadium. So we were a little bit far away. But I thought, oh, wow. Because it might have been like his last or his second to last season. And I thought, I got to see him pitch, or at least be there, and he was pitching, somewhere, this little dot, on the
Mhm.
mound. And that was great. And I know that I don't think that I was there, but one time, my oldest brother and his friends, they were on TV at Cleveland Stadium once, dancing around. My mom always tells that story, how she saw them, on the broadcast. And then so now, we don't go as much now because it's actually not as affordable as it
Oh, no.
used to be.
Yeah.
But I have one great memory from a summer. I'll show this, where I was visiting from Japan, and we
Mhm.
did go. And let's see if I can share my screen here. And it was the Indians against, so nice, great weather. Oh, this is the photo I want to share. This one isn't either, but there we go. It was Indians against the Mariners, and it was Felix Hernandez and Corey Kluber. So you can imagine how the pitching was. It
Sure.
was 2-0 Indians, and the game was 2 hours and 10 minutes. So they they were
Goodness.
just mowing them down. The shortest 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 on both sides. The Indians were lucky. I don't know if it was a home run or what it was, but they were lucky
Right.
to get those 2 runs. And we're like, wow, we're already going back, and it's only barely after 9 o'clock. You know,
Those were the
but
times when you needed the restroom, you really don't wanna leave because you might miss 2 innings.
yeah, right. No, but perfect weather that day. And
Wow.
yeah, so now we don't go to to games, and we might go to, we haven't, but we might go to, like, minor league games sometimes. But and then and then if I would ever visit home in the summer, or I mean in the winter or in the fall, then I would ask my dad to take me to a hockey game. Because
Mm.
unlike, so with, in your case, similar to you listening to the radio, in the wintertime, I could get the Detroit station on the
Mhm.
AM, and I would go into my room and listen to every Red Wings game, because,
Nice.
we didn't have a team in Columbus then. And I would just sit there, and the Ken Cal was the announcer then, and he still is. And just, he's such a great announcer to listen to those games. And they were so, when I when I was still listening to them, they got really good and won the cup a few times. But when I first, started listening to them, I just chose them because I knew they were close and I thought I could get them on the radio. And there was something so amazing about hockey that I loved.
Was this WJR
That's the one.
in Detroit?
Yep,
Yeah.
that's the one. Yeah, and I would listen to those games, and it was so neat. Such a great thing about AM radio, and then especially in the winter, because it comes in extra clear. And yeah, and then my dad would, sometimes we would go. Then the Blue Jackets came to town, and sometimes we'd go to those games. And they weren't that good then either, so they didn't always win. But I know there was one game where they won it in overtime with my dad and I watching. That was really a great time. So
Nice.
yeah.
Nice.
Mhm.
Before you go on, I want to interject while I'm thinking of it. Nolan Ryan, I saw him at the beginning of his career,
Wow.
probably Los Angeles Angels, maybe.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
But anyhow, and we knew of he was a little wilder then, even though he threw hard.
Yeah.
We knew of him, of course, and I remember I don't know who I was with, but I remember going down to the bullpen to watch him warm up before the game just to see a guy that threw that
That
hard.
hard. Yeah.
During the game, and I'll never know for sure, the Indians get a runner on first, okay?
Uh,
And he's taking a pretty good lead.
yeah.
Nolan was known as a feisty
Yeah.
personality. He
Yeah.
sure fights in his life and
Yeah.
so on. So the guy is heading back to first. Nolan's thrown over a few
Mm.
times.
Mhm.
The guy's heading back to first. Nolan really lets a throw rip and nails a dude right in the back.
Ooh.
And I'm thinking, I think he did it on purpose. He's tired of this guy leading off.
Lead off and you slide back and lead. Oh, man. Wow.
And guy, I'm sure the guy took shorter leads after that.
Yeah. Whoa.
Oh, man.
Oh, that's
Nolan
so good.
Ryan, the
Ooh.
Ryan Express.
Yeah, right.
Extraordinary. He never seemed to have arm problems.
Uh-uh.
It just
Yeah, he
he
did
had
pitch
that,
for a long time too.
and he pitched for a long time. Yeah,
Mhm.
so many
Mhm.
teams, and
Mhm.
yeah, when you said Texas, I knew
Yeah. I remember I
I
was
knew you were going to
checking
be.
the paper every day, who was the starting pitcher that day. Oh, good, it wasn't him. Oh, there's a chance. I mean, I know the rotation is more than just 3 people, but, it's the 3rd game, it's the last game of the series. It
I
might
used
be
to do
him.
that exact thing.
Yeah.
For the Indians in the '60s, I would want it to be Sam McDowell. He
Oh,
was he was a Blazer too,
yeah.
and, I would watch during the week, okay, all right, Siebert pitched,
Uh-huh.
let's see if a quick memory of Sam McDowell,
Yeah.
one of those silly little things. When we would go to the stadium, I'm sure you were exactly the same. The dream was to get a ball,
Oh, yeah.
always took the glove, all those things, and I
Mhm.
never did.
No.
But I remember, and I wanted to get to the stadium like 5 hours early,
Oh, yeah, really? Oh, yeah. Oh, I can't believe it, yeah.
and we would get there somewhat early, watch batting practice. Sam was not pitching this
Mhm.
particular day. He's
Mhm.
out in the outfield,
Mhm.
and there was maybe this wide at the foul pole for home runs. There was
Yeah.
like a piece of fencing,
Yeah.
you know? Sam's out there, he's got a ball, and there's kids behind this just
Oh,
like
yeah.
crazy. "Sam,
Yeah.
throw me the ball."
Yeah.
Sam kept throwing it against this thing, you know? And the and the kids were
Brutal.
screaming louder and, "Come on, Sam, come on." He was having a great time, and then, of course, he lets a few go,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
kids
yeah,
go
yeah.
into the stands, but Sam was just having a great time with the kids, and yay for him.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool.
Only reinforced my image of good guy Sam.
Mhm, mhm. Wow. Yeah.
Any other photos to share or memories?
No, I feel like it's been such a great episode that this would be a great time to wrap it up unless you have something else that you'd like to add, but
Let me just check my list real quick.
yeah.
I mean, we covered a lot of ground, and I
Mhm.
loved us moving into things that were sort of unexpected.
Mhm, mhm.
I never went to a Browns game, never have.
I didn't
Um,
either, yeah. Mhm.
you have not?
Uh-uh.
Okay.
No.
I remember one quick game in the fall. We didn't have enough kids for football necessarily.
Uh-huh.
We played this game. You need a dad for it. It was
Uh-huh.
called Throw 'em Up, Tear 'em Down.
Okay.
Not exactly strategic. The dad would throw the football straight up into the air, and we'd kill each other,
Trying
seeing
to
who would
get it.
end up with the ball. There's the game.
I wonder if that's the official name.
I was not one of the bigger kids, so
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
naturally, I seldom.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Mm,
Yeah,
mhm,
yeah.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, and then with, I thought we did wanna talk a little bit about our own kids.
Mm,
Yeah, here we live on a real quiet street, so my kids and I will spend time outside just in the street and or in this little park next to our house, which we've talked about in a few episodes in the past, but, we'll, like if we're in the park, we'll, you know the fence is one goal and the bush is the other goal and, one-on-one soccer or, we'll my older son and I will sub out, and be against our younger son and who we give him a little bit of a bigger goal. Or we'll do dodgeball or, you know, my dad sent us a really nice vortex football. They're real easy to get a spiral on and throw real far. So we'll throw that around or we my younger son likes to take a stick, nice good strong stick that we found, and that's the bat, and I'll pitch a real soft, could be indoor, could be outdoor baseball to him that he'll do his best to whack at, and
wait.
but yeah, then the one thing I will say, this will probably be my last story to share.
Mhm.
We went to this bigger park that's not far away. And it does have a wooded area and it has like a path that goes in the woods. And, when my second son came along, then it was harder to go there as often as we did. And then as they got older, we just started to do other things instead. And then one year we went there again with this little, like I guess like a strider, so a bicycle without pedals that you use for like learning how to ride a bicycle. and
Yes.
and I was pushing the younger one on it, and my older son, I think he was 7 or so, 6 or 7, and he said, Dad, I loved it so much when you would push me on that and push me through the woods because it was a wooded path. It was really steep, actually, and I would just, I would pretend that he was on a motorcycle and I'm doing the noise, and I would, th- you know, not I was younger then too, so I wasn't killing my back out, but some days I was pretty sore, and I would just like push him up there as hard as I could get him up there. And then the fact that like he was only 2 and even 5 years later, he still remembered that, and even now, even just when he's 9 now, he mentioned it again. He said, "That was my favorite memory when you would just push me up that hill and, push me all through this park." And, 'cause there was another big hill in the park, and I'd, like, push him down and then push him up it, and then I would do my best to, have a controlled speedy
Right.
descent. And wow, the fact that he remembers that was so special for me and obviously for him too. And
Yeah,
again, like
that's
those
huge. I
using your
hope he'll be telling
imagination.
I
Yeah.
hope he'll be
Mhm.
telling that story
Oh man, I
later in
really hope
life
that
is
that he would too. That would be so special for me to find out
nice.
if he did. Yeah.
Sweet.
Mhm.
Well, that's great.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, uh, I think one of the warmer memories for me, again, baseball related, is my daughter grew up because I was a baseball fanatic.
Mhm.
She evolved into playing softball and so on.
Mm.
But more so than watching her games, which were delightful, and was we traveled to Vermont every summer to camp and became Indians/Red Sox fans,
Ah.
and I would listen to Red Sox games up
Mhm.
there,
Mhm.
and my daughter knew and knows the game very well.
Mhm.
She really does know the game,
Mhm.
and as the Red Sox were emerging in 2004,
Yeah.
as we watched those playoffs together, that's something I'll never forget. the real quick story being before the World Series, they were down 3 games to
I
nothing to the
know.
Yankees and came back and won 4 in a row. I don't know
Yeah.
that it's ever been done again. And you're sitting there going, "This is going to happen." This is going to happen. And then the World Series, of course, was icing on the cake. It was
Yeah.
almost anticlimactic, but, the sharing those moments, just living and dying with that team was
Oh, yeah.
warms my heart now.
Yeah. Yeah, especially with that long history that they had of teams that were good enough that could have
Mhm.
won, and then they just couldn't win, and then they got it together.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Being able to share that is really great. Yeah.
Thanks.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Anything else you wanna share or final comments and I'll before we wrap it up?
Nope, I had a great time. I
Me too, yeah.
hope our viewers find some joy in this. We certainly
I
did.
think so too, and yeah, we would like to extend a very heartfelt thanks to everyone who is watching and listening along today. One of these great episodes that we get every once in a while where, I mean, I think they're all great, but some of these really stand out for me where, you know, the show kind of tells itself as we go along, and I feel that that's kind of what we had today, where we could talk about the great memories that we had being kids and think about how those impacted us now and how we hoped and have been able to share them with the people around us too. And we want to just say again, thanks for the quick cameo that Jacob had today. That was real fun. And probably next episode will be all three of us with equal airtime. And so for the Two World Podcast, today with Ken, I am Barney, and we will see you all again next time.